What's going on, guys? It's Dave Haas here with the Rise Up Rich podcast, and I got a very special guest here today. Jaz Morneau is a guy that I've known for a long time from the bar business, and I think he has a really unique story on a whole bunch of levels. One is he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2010, and he's really been able to kind of move past that diagnosis and kind of break free from the norms of what people that have diabetes, they're not usually people that are active, and there's all kinds of things that could happen to you when you get a diagnosis like that just become debilitating, and you were able to kind of come out on the other side. So I really want to dig into that to figure out like what were the keys that allowed you to do that, because I think a lot of people here, that listen to the podcast, there might be all kinds of people that have different types of limitations. And for you to move past those limitations and do what you're doing, I think is amazing. So I think we want to dig into that. The other thing is that, you went to like a really dark place in your life for a bit, and you were also able to come through that. And, you've gotten to this place where you have this really positive mindset, and you're understanding that it's never about what's going on out there, and it's always about what's going on in here. And just from the conversations that we had, I can tell that mindset is what helped pull you out of depression and some like really, really low states. And I think that's like really crucial, because when people are in depression, they're in these like a state of apathy where they have no energy to kind of go on. So when you have no energy, how do you find the energies? That's like one of the things I want to dig into. And the last thing, which is really cool, Jaz is a proactive holistic health coach, and it's kind of like a full picture of everything that's kind of going on with somebody. And a big part of what he does is like fascial stretch therapy and talking about movement, posture, all these kinds of things. And I think that is like the next thing that's going to happen in fitness. Like we've gone through like the CrossFits and the bodybuilding stages, but I think the next stage is going to be in movement. So I think that's something that is really going to provide a ton of value to people. So first and foremost, Jaz, welcome, and thanks for coming on the podcast. And I just want to kind of let you kind of run free here with your story and just kind of give us your history, give us your background, give us why you wanted to come on this podcast and share your story, because it takes some courage to do that. So I'll just kind of give you the floor here.
Sweet. First of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I just felt it's about time for me to actually share my story. I've been doing a lot of inner work in the last probably 5 years, intense the last 2. And I think I'm at a point where I've learned enough to now get to that next step and next level to actually start sharing and hopefully inspiring people that there always is hope. There is always a better way out there, a safer way to come out. So I grew up here in Windsor, Ontario, kind of always the black sheep of the family. There's like stuff that went at home, typical, I feel Windsor kid, broken home, parents remarried, things like that. Stepdad was a bit strict and things like that, but I made a conscious effort at 7 years old to just observe, and whatever I feel worked, I would keep and add to my skill set and personality, and what didn't work, I'd get rid of. And I've always kind of been a person that cut my own path. I, not necessarily fight against authority, but question it and make sure that whatever I decided was for the greater good. So when I was about 20, I moved to Toronto. Inspirations to be, the next Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt. Quickly realized that it's a very hard industry, but I got into stand-up comedy and loved it. And the reason why I got into it was this hope of sending a positive message out there. I was roughly diagnosed, and I've kind of been in and out of diagnosis of depression and bipolar starting at the age of 13. So I've always kind of had this I guess what some people call demons or whatever. I just say an undeveloped mindset at this point. And there's sometimes where I've thought about suicide even as a young kid, but tried to use the arts and writing specifically to get that out. Anytime I was frustrated with my stepdad or whatever, I would write maybe something a little dark, but and I guess that's why I love horror so much, is that when I write that horror, it's that stuff that I've thought about that I would never act on, but releasing that, because it's not good to hold on to that negative energy, and using that as a format. But as a typical artist, I thought I'd have to suffer through for the art, and especially in the winter, really going through that depression, but feeling that I was supposed to go through that depression in order to write, in order to have something of substance to talk about. And it became a very vicious cycle. Drank a lot, partied a lot, especially as like a comedian. That just kind of went hand in hand, and then doing lighting and sound as a way of making money if I wasn't bartending or cooking in kitchens, because you got to do what you got to do to survive, and have food on your table and rent and things like that. So it burnt me out. At one point I was sleeping maybe 2 hours a week, working about 114 hours a week, and I got burnt out. So I was 27, and I just came back from Christmas. I was living in Toronto, came back to visit family, and the tradition at my father's house was we play King's Cup like all the kids. And I was trying to avoid that, but I came back, they were still playing, and then they caught me up and got like super blackout drunk, puked while I was sleeping. It was horrible, and then like never really felt the same after that. So I started an overnight security job and was drinking a lot of water, always constantly feeling dehydrated, irritable, and I'm like, something's up. Because like I've been fortunate, one of my cousins, Nicole, from the age of 16 kind of but invited me into her yoga practice, and would go to some of her yoga classes, which kind of gave me a start of that taste of that holistic health. So I was like, I knew enough that something was off. So I went and got some blood work done, and the next day I got a call at 8:30 in the morning from my doctor's office being like, you need to go to the hospital. Your blood sugar's at 30.7. You got to go get checked in. And I remember I just started crying, and I was like, well, what, really? Like, because most of my family, like on both sides of the family, at one point there were 11 type 2s, diabetics. And so, I thought I was doing enough to not get type 2. So getting type 1, I was like, well, of course, I'm the black sheep of the family, so of course I would get type 1, not type 2. And yeah, that first 2 years were really like hit home. I probably went through some of the worst depression I've ever gone through. I remember specifically I was living in Ottawa for a brief time, and I just got to the point where I was so frustrated that I had one of my knives to my wrist, and I just happened to call my sister, and it was one of those few, like, her and I got along as kids, but as later in life, especially with moving away, we were kind of night and day. So we weren't always that close, but she really helped talk me out of that, and that I feel was that game changer, whereas I didn't want to get to that point ever again. I've some burn marks on me from scarification and doing that. Like I was never, it was more about the pain and inflicting that upon myself than actually ending my life, because there is that bit of fear of what is out there, especially younger and that and afraid. And I mean, now I don't fear death. If it happens, it happens. And with some of the stuff that I've come up with and in my research and my own practices, is I don't see, like, death is almost a beginning type thing. So yeah. So shortly after that, I went on a tour in 2012. I did the Fringe Festival tour. I'm not sure if you know what that is.
I'm not. We talked a little bit about it, but yeah, why don't you just kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if anyone that doesn't know what the Fringe Festival is, it happens all over the world. It's a theater festival. The first one was in Edinburgh, Scotland, and it happens all over. There's one in Windsor. There's one in Toronto. The two big ones in Canada and North America are actually Winnipeg, which is number 2, and Edmonton is actually the biggest one in North America. So I did New York, Ottawa, Toronto, Winnipeg, Calgary, and San Francisco, doing an aerial silk clown show with a friend of mine, Azana, and that was one of the best experiences in my life. That really helped push me into getting more healthier and really start taking care of myself. Around that time, I started cutting out gluten, I cut out eggs, and was eating a lot more healthier, a lot more vegetables, lots more fruits. The Azana, who I was touring with, she was vegetarian, so she kind of helped, and with us staying at her parents in the middle of the woods in Western Massachusetts, like, she really helped show like a bit more of a holistic approach. And from there I started researching more and found like what foods would help, and was starting to get my blood sugars better obtained. And through that and posting, I started having friends ask me certain things about food, about what I'm doing, and from there kind of inspired me to go back to school. So in 2015, I went back in Toronto at Mannix College for fitness and health promotion to get into personal training. And because I needed, the last thing that kind of needed to go was working in kitchens and the bar scene, because again, that I would drink on the job, like straight up. I'd have a Mickey of vodka with me and drink, and it was toxic because of the environment of this unnecessary rush and negativity that I allowed my energy and get involved with that. So once I quit working in kitchens and doing this schooling, I stopped drinking, stopped partying as much, and really that's when I started seeing the difference. I went on the pump, and the pump really started helping regulate my blood sugars. And then through the schooling, I was very fortunate that it was a supply. Like, the normal teacher that taught that course was on sabbatical for pregnancy or pregnancy leave, whatever you call it, and she took a very holistic approach, the teacher that we had. So through that, I really started divulging back into that holistic life, and really started noticing the difference. And like, I feel now my blood sugars are the best that they've ever been. I get more consistent within that range. I'm pretty much 80% vegan at this point. And I can tell the difference when I eat something that's more bad for you than good. And it's crazy to tell the difference. So, after I was done schooling, I came back to Windsor, in 2016, because the program was a year, and I came back because my dad was pretty much on his last leg, so I thought I'd come back before he passed away and spent some time. And he passed April 2017. He was a type 2, never really took care of himself, was a hard drinker for 30 years, and his solution was, well, if I take more insulin, then I'm okay to eat that extra piece of cake, and it really messed him up. So I used that as an example of what not to do to control your diabetes. So when I moved back here, I started working at Good Life, which was a short stint. And then I ended up working at, which is now Crunch Fitness. And there they introduced me to Joe Arco, who does FST. And I did his course and fell in love with that mobility. Because I think it's so important with, it doesn't matter how much weight you lift if you can't move functionally and have that range of motion. Like I laugh at those guys that are really big and then they try and scratch their nose and they have to bend their whole body and then scratch it. It's like, well, what's the point of having those big muscles if you can't use them properly? So and I really noticed in Windsor that it's become like the Florida of Canada. So we have a lot of seniors here, and a lot of the trainers that I was working with never wanted to deal with them. And I'm like, they're the best clients because they're willing to listen. They know that it's more about taking care of themselves overall than, just looking big in that appearance. And that's kind of what's motivated me to divulge more and get into human kinetics, is that be that trainer's trainer to teach these kids that it's not all about that appearance. It's that overall that you have to look over your body. And first and foremost is mindset. If you don't have a good mindset, then it doesn't matter what you eat or what kind of activity you're doing. It's all moot, because that whatever your mindset you are in is going to project for that whole day. So if you're negative, you're going to project that negativity and attract it. And if you're positive, then you're going to attract that positivity. So especially in the last year and a half, that's what I've developed and what's really have pushed me to where I'm at now, and feeling the best and clear than I've ever been.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's a cool story. So, just kind of taken back to, the depression when, if you can just think back to when you're at your lowest of the low, I don't know what that exact point was for you, but, you're at the lowest of the low, you're feeling like you don't have the energy to go on anymore. You're contemplating suicide, and you reach out to your sister, which obviously I think was a critical factor. Was it your sister you reached out? Yeah. So it's obviously a critical factor, just the act of reaching out for help. And, I'll just kind of elaborate on that, because I know that was probably the point where things kind of started to shift for you, was that act. And what ultimately, the way I would describe that act is like an act of surrender. You're ultimately saying hey, I don't have this on my own. I need help with this. And for you, it was reaching out to your sister. For other people, it might be God or the universe or whatever it may be. But just the act of saying, I need help, is a really great place to start the shift. If you don't get to that place, you're unwilling to ask for the help, then you're going to be in rough shape. The first step is the willingness. The second step is the actual act of asking. So I think that was probably one of the critical factors. But if you're thinking to the people that are listening here that might be suffering from depression or being as low as you were, what do you think were the key factors? This could be over the course of a long time, but what do you think the key factors were that really just kind of started getting you to see the light and started to make those mindset shifts that you were talking about?
I guess it boiled down to the willingness to be alive. And I hope this doesn't come across as egotistical or whatever, but I've always felt this purpose of helping others. And that's kind of what's kept me alive, is that I need to be here. I'm here for a reason, and that I'm not meant to kill myself. So trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to do to be happy? What do I need to get back on track? And just doing those baby steps. Again, after going on that tour, it helped. a lot. And then I spent 2 years in Edmonton, or I sometimes call it Deadmonton. And I mean, in hindsight, and even in moments living there, I knew I was there to be kind of broken down. And I went through like a pretty consistent depression there. Kind of felt very alone, and especially with the weather there, snowing in October till like May long weekend. And but I met a couple really great friends that I'm still friends with now, and it again helped me get to that point where I am today, and needed to be broken down of those old ideals, old habits, in order to build the new ones, the more positive ones. And even I guess, what is it, spring of last year, I kind of went through something with a former friend now, that really put me through a serious depression. And a friend from grade school, we ended up meeting up. They introduced me to the website Gaia.com, which has been a great source and kind of the game changer for me. A lot of the programs on there are about esoteric ideologies, looking at ancient civilizations, world religions, and quantum physics, and kind of melding them together. So one of the big influential programs was, it was called Missing Links from Greg Braden. And in there, he, especially in the first season, he talks about this heart-brain harmony. And there's actually the Heart-Brain Institute now, and they've come up with this, by linking your heart and your brain to work together, you can unlock greater consciousness, deeper intuition, and even a greater self-healing. And I started using those practices, and it's basically using the 4 words, what they've done studies, which actually will change the frequency in your body, especially in your heart, to zero point 0.1 hertz, which is actually, when they did the study, the optimal range that you want your heart in. And the 4 words are compassion, appreciation, gratitude, and love, and what they mean to you. So I do that at least every night before I go to bed. So even if I felt a little upset, I think about those, and I make sure that I go to bed in a positive mindset than a negative.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I mean, all of those 4 have been like huge game changers for me. I think it's like really important here to highlight just a few things that you kind of touched upon. One is, you had mentioned that like when you're at this low point, you were like, I feel like I'm here to do something. I'm here to help people, and I think a lot of us resonate with like that. Resonates with a lot of us that. And I think that's ultimately the purpose of life, is to live to your maximum potential, and to give, unconditionally. So when you just put that out there to the universe or to God or whatever your understanding is of a higher power, and especially when it's in this in a sense that you're doing it for whatever's in the greatest good,
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get support from infinite intelligence, God, the universe. For me, it's God, but you're going to get that support. And it's just interesting that even though I think you didn't even realize that's what you were doing in that moment, but you had this realization, I'm here to do something. I have the will to live. Right from that moment, you started getting support from the universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
You met your friends that started creating new awarenesses for you around food. And that's where my awareness began. My first real awarenesses in life started around food. What I thought was healthy was not even remotely healthy, and I think a lot of people have that. So once I came to this realization that I had no clue what was actually healthy, and I saw that awareness, how it changed my entire life. Like I got in better shape when I went veg, and my energy levels were higher, and all of this was just because I had expanded the circle of what I knew. So with that realization, then I said, I want to expand the circle of what I know in every other area possible. But the most important fact, I think, here is that, you know, that the universe or God is going to support that. You know, when you are willing to maximize your potential and give back to others, you're going to get the support, you know. The next thing is, and this is also from that support, was the connection, I think, that you started making with some people, right? You know, a great tool, I think, to come out of depression is to connect with other people. When you get into these states of depression, you see the people that are in states of depression, they don't want to go out, you know, they don't want to put themselves into social settings. And it's very easy to like kind of just go into your shell and hide in your corner. And the more you do that, the more you know, you kind of crave it. And then the more uncomfortable it becomes to be into social settings. So, but you know, because you put that willingness out there that you needed help, and you put the willingness out there that you want to live and you want to maximize your potential and you want to help others, you got the support. You got the support from the universe. And then the support took you in a few areas. It took you, you know, bring some more awareness around the food that you're eating. The next one was to connect with some people, you know. So I think there's some real critical things there. And the tools, I mean, I think you mentioned the 4 of them, right? Like we can just go into those a little bit, but for me, I'll you know, they were gratitude, compassion, right?
Yeah.
Love.
Correct.
What was the last one?
And do you have appreciation?
Appreciation. Right. Okay. So we'll just kind of go through them here. But gratitude for me, I mean, I've said this a million times in Rise Up Rich things. It's like it's a game changer for me because it got me focused on what I do have and not focused on what I don't have. And once you stop focusing on what you don't have, then you create a greater level of happiness, a greater level of joy. And once you start getting to these points of higher states of consciousness where you're experiencing joy, then abundance starts to flow into your life. And that was because of gratitude for me. The other one that I'll touch upon, and I'll let you take the other 2, are just love. You know, when we think of love, we always think of romantic love, but this is not the type of love we're talking about. We're talking about like love for humanity, love for all. You know, I have love for every single person that I've ever met in my entire life. I have love for every single person in the world, even murderers. You know, even child molesters, and people are gonna give me pushback on that, but you know, I'm at a point in my life where I can forgive anybody for anything. You know, even the darkest things that you could consider happening. You know, especially now that I'm a father, it's like, you know, like you just even can imagine if anything ever happened to that kid, if someone ever caused harm to them, how far I would have to dig to find forgiveness. But I know because of this my spiritual practice that I will find it within me to forgive, because I know this one simple thing is that when you love everyone unconditionally, you have to accept where they are at their own life, you know, and that person that would have harmed anyone that I love was only doing what they knew how to do, right? So when you get to this point, it's just like, it's a really freeing, because holding on to anger, holding on to you know, not forgiving, revenge, whatever it may be, it's not hurting the other person, it's only hurting you. So when you have love for everyone, you can see how all that stuff just kind of goes out the window. So what about for you, and what about compassion and appreciation? How have they played a role, and like what are some of the things that you write down about compassion and appreciation at the end of every night, you know?
So just wanted to touch on something really quick, is that whole about love. What I've discovered is, as third dimensional beings, that the greatest thing that we have to overcome is ego. And once we overcome that ego and understand that we are one, and doesn't matter what your beliefs are or what you look like, that at the end of the day, we are one. We are a part of that one consciousness of the universe. Because you use God, I use universe, but again, there's that difference of spirituality and religion. Religion is man-made and meant to control, and spirituality is about that inner connection and realizing the connection that we have within everyone.
I once heard that spirituality doesn't need religion, but religion needs spirituality, which I thought was a cool quote.
Yeah, that's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and looking at frequencies and ideally you're trying to higher your frequency, and the more higher it is, the more positive you're going to be. So, the one thing that I always say for appreciation, or more often than not, it kind of flips between the appreciation of having my dog. Um, that was a huge thing. So I'll quickly go into that story if that's okay. So her name's Kira. She's a Husky Shepherd, and in 2016, when I moved to my last place in Toronto before coming here, I roughly mentioned to the landlord about possibly wanting a dog, and she's like, yeah, it's pet friendly. So then about 6 weeks later, someone in the building was moving out, and I ended up with their dog, Kira. And so I took her for the trial, took her out for a walk. She did her business, came back, and then about an hour later, she started making, not barking, but weird noises, like something's up. So I'm like, okay, I'll take you out. She didn't have to do anything, but on the way back, I was like, I'm not feeling right. So go back, I test my blood sugar, and I was having a low, and she actually reacted to that. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, I guess you're my dog now. Because when you have a moment like that, you can't say, oh, universe, that you can't go against what the universe is trying to provide for you. So and through that's helped a lot, even in those dark moments and moments of frustration with life or people or whatever the case is. I just look at her, and she's just and then snuggles, and so I'm very appreciative for that. And the other thing is the appreciation of being back in school at 37, having the chance to get into human kinetics, and the staff there being very helpful, trying to help as much as they can, especially with sometimes my blood sugars are out of whack. Even when I came in, my blood sugar was at 21, which is really high. So you can do the best you can, but sometimes it just slips up, and instead of being frustrated, be like, screw you, you just, okay, well, let's just fix it and do the best that I can, and move on, because I can't let it hinder, because I enjoy living, I enjoy being helped. I have now I have compassion for humanity. I feel we're in this very critical moment in history. So much is going on, and it's very chaotic, and we need more people to step up and help unify the planet, unify us as a species, to realize that we are not different. And instead of feeding into the system of segregation and separation, which I feel a realization that I've come to recently, is that the system is set up for that, because with that you can cause so much chaos, so much anger, so much fear, that the negative entities can thrive on that. The whole yin yang is, yes, there's positive and negative, so we have to act accordingly. So it's, you choose to allow yourself to resonate with negativity or positivity, and there's consequences for either, and you can't blame others when you allowed yourself to get to that point. And it's up to you to realize that you're in that point, and to help yourself. And by helping yourself, you are helping the greater good. Because what I've noticed is, now with the way I am, and spreading positivity and being as helpful as I can, that other friends are starting to notice, and they're reacting to that, and they're trying to be their better. And I've also lost friends as well because of that, because they've decided to not resonate with what I'm saying, and it's a reality of life, and I can't be upset about that. I'm just doing the best that I can at the end of the day.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a really good point, is that, especially in today's world where, you're talking negativity is, there's such a spotlight on it now. with social media and all these kinds of things. But there also can be a spotlight on positivity, and be the change you want to see in the world. I think Gandhi was it Gandhi that said that? Yeah,
I think yeah.
And ultimately, what he's saying there is that when you start to change, you're going to attract people that are going to seek out your help, like, and say, what are you doing? When someone loses a bunch of weight, the number one question everyone asks them, what'd you do?
Yeah.
But that can also translate into when you start experiencing more joy in your life, when you start becoming more positive, when abundance is flowing into your life, people are asking you, like, what are you doing? So that's, I think while there is a bunch of negativity and it's being, highlighted in this world today, the other thing that's happening is that there's just so much positivity being highlighted, and things like these podcasts and, awareness is like what we talked about, expanding my circle of what I knew. If you want to use food, I had to get that information from my business partner at the time, right? Because it was like the internet was still new, and it wasn't, you were still hard to navigate, and the connection speeds were slow and all that kind of stuff. But now, though, it's very easy to expand the circle of what you know. You can just plug in this podcast, and you can expand the circle of what you know. And you've already gave some great tips, but ultimately, the tide raises all boats. So the best thing that you can do for humanity or for the world is to help yourself.
Yep.
And by helping yourself, you're going to help others. So yeah, I think that's critical for sure, and some really good points that you made there. Let's dig into the diabetes a little bit here, because I have like a very unique perspective on disease, and I know that diabetes type 2 is reversible through food and diet, exercise, but type 1 is supposed to be like chronic for life. Is that the case, or what?
In traditional science, yes, it's
right.
irreversible, but in some of the stuff that I've come across through documentaries and stuff like that it is possible. Now, so right now I'm in the process of trying to look into using like a photon laser and 7 hertz frequency, which is the frequency of the earth, and ideally it's by shooting the photon laser through a healthy pancreas into, so let's say if your pancreas is healthy, I'm assuming, and spleen, it would shoot it through you, then into me, and it would carry the healthy cells from you and put it into me, and it would take about a week for it to regenerate. They've done 2 studies in Russia and 1 in actually Toronto on mice with 90% success rate.
Oh, wow.
So, and again, this is where the holistic part comes in. Just really realizing that the traditional methods that are given to us aren't always the most effective or beneficial, and they're put there for a reason, but there are a lot of other safer holistic type of treatments out there. And at the end of the day, I feel because of the lifestyle that I was leading, I got type 1 in order to put me on to this path. Like that's how far I've come with it. At first I was very F you about diabetes, F you family, like why is this happening, and going through that kind of victim mode. And now it's, it was definitely a learning tool, and I am appreciative that through that it's kind of put me on to this path. And I feel that what I was looking for through the arts, I've found through this holistic health coaching. Is I have a client that he's a senior, and his posture, he was leaning to the right and forward when I first met him, and now I have him upright, and his posture is so much better. And Another client that I had, he has kyphosis, so exaggerated T-spine. And when I started with him, he was at 39 degrees. I was able to, in 3 months, to get him to 37. So, having those moments and seeing the results is so rewarding, and it continues to motivate me to keep doing what I do.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think there's going to be any better way to help the world if you figure out how to cure yourself of that type 1 diabetes, because in the field, in the world out there, it's like, it's an incurable disease. But I've been witness to, multiple people that have cured incurable diseases. I just posted a thing on my Facebook about this girl that had Hashimoto's disease, and through spiritual developments, through, some dietary changes, through spiritual healing treatments, getting to the root of the issues, she was able to overcome it. She got off all medications. She's healthier than she's ever been. I've witnessed people that have been cured from cancer, but these are the people that did everything. They did everything that was, suggested to them, that they felt was in the highest good. And ultimately, again, it comes to this place of surrender and saying to God, saying to the universe, I need help with this. I can't figure it out on my own. So please present the people into my life that will be able to, solve this for me, and the universe will bring that to you, and it'll bring it to you in abundance, So that is just about navigating through. So for me personally, like, I have this belief that diseases don't exist. Okay, so sitting across from someone that has type 1 diabetes, you're probably like, fuck you, Dave. But the fact of the matter is, I think you're already on to it, is that people believe that diseases are out there floating around, waiting to come and get you. And that's not the case. No. And then you mentioned it, you touched upon it, which I think is crucial. I mean, like, this is like a critical point of this podcast here. If you can just take this one thing home, is that, everything begins and ends in the body. And if the body is unhealthy, it could be even out of balance, out of line, but also it could be unhealthy on a bunch of other levels, which would be like emotional, in lower states of consciousness, that, it's going to start producing problems.
Yeah.
And, we want, as a society, to have a magic pill, take insulin. Like, it's pretty well known now that type 2 diabetics can cure type 2 diabetes by changing their diet. What were we doing 20, 30 years ago, and we're still doing it, is it's like, oh, don't change your diet, take this insulin, right? And so now with that awareness has expanded, more people are open to the idea of changing their diets. But before that existed in the field, no one was doing it. So all that is missing for the cure for type 1 diabetes now, because we have the cure for type 2 diabetes, which is through diet, exercise, and also, I would say, spiritual development. But now with something that is incurable, that should be removed from any doctor's vocabulary. It's, just unbelievable that a doctor would even say that to somebody. But all that needs to happen is an expansion of consciousness, right? An expansion of awareness. Bring it into the field. So what do I talk about the field? And this is I'm just going to get into this for a second, because I think you're aligned with this. Is once things exist in collective consciousness, we are all one. Jaz talked about the ego, and we could have a whole freaking podcast on the ego. But this is not ego like, oh, I have a big ego, like that. It's ego. It's about the mind. It's about those controlling thoughts. It's about its narcissistic core. It always wants to be right. That the ego is, I am Dave and you are Jaz. But there's a higher level, a higher self, that you want to align with, where, there is no Dave and Jaz. We're all connected. We're all one. We're all part of everything. We're all part of this earth, this universe, whatever. And in that field, in that non-dualistic world, there's this collective consciousness, infinite intelligence. And there's been all kinds of crazy studies done with infinite intelligence. One, there's like mice in Russia, and there's mice in America, and they have a maze to go through, right? And the mice in America can't figure it out, but the Russian mice figure it out. And as soon as the Russian mice figure it out, the American mice figure it out, right? That is what collective consciousness is, Another easier way to understand it is, a wildebeest is born and instantaneously is running, So why is it running? Well, if it didn't run, it would be dead and really quickly, right?
Yeah.
It's in collective consciousness. An animal knows not to eat a certain nut or a certain berry. Why is that possible? I just happened to rewatch the movie Into the Wild, right? And where he eats the wrong berry. I was like, well, those berries are out there. Why aren't all these animals eating them and dying? It's because it's in collective consciousness that they know that they, if they eat those, they're going to get sick and they're going to die. So that collective consciousness, that power, the healing fields exist. Jesus was an amazing healer. There's all kinds of amazing healers that I could put all kinds of people in contact with that do the miraculous on a daily basis. So what I'm trying to say is that the healing fields exist in collective consciousness, but we just need to expand that and tap into that. And once you start to do that, that's when real, true healing is going to begin. And I think, what a cool experience. It's just so energizing to hear a guy like you. You're sitting here, you got your insulin pump on, and you're like, I now see that this was like a great gift for me. This is a gift. This has motivated me to help others, and other people could go down a completely different road.
Yep.
And life is a series of decisions, and you either make more good decisions or more bad decisions, and ultimately it's going to determine your path. And you chose here to make like a really good decision and turn this negative into a positive, which I think is like sending it down this really unique path that could lead to you being completely free of this apparent disease. Which is really, really cool. Let's just shift gears here. It's all real amazing stuff, and I think you're on the right path. But let's just talk about posture and movement and proper mobility. I just think that it's such something that's been missing in health and fitness for so long. I just recently went to this girl Jamie, who has been really showing me how I'm just my posture's all screwed up and my range of motion's all screwed up, and I was like, oh wow, I can't believe this. And now I'm doing more yoga, I'm stretching more, I'm doing just even simple wrist rotations, shoulder rotations, all stuff that I wasn't doing before. And it's energizing me. My energy levels are getting higher. My range of motion's getting higher. And I'm like, oh, this is it. This is what I was missing. This entire time that I've been working out for however long, this is the thing that I was missing. And I ultimately think that joint health and movement health, is what's going to allow you to lead a long life. People get into this old age and I sail with this guy, and his name's Len, and he's 70 and he still sails and everything. He's like, but I'm getting older. I got to stop sailing soon. And I'm like, Len, sailing is what's keeping you young, right? And that's what a lot of people do when they get older. They stop doing things because they think they get into this mindset that I'm old now and I can't squat down anymore. And I even catch myself doing it sometimes. I was vacuuming my floor the other day and I had to squat down to change disconnect the hose, and I was trying to do it with my foot, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I'm just bend down and undo the damn thing, right? But you get into this mindset. I'm getting older, I can't bend over as much. But I now know, because of being introduced to this stuff, because I expanded my circle, that this movement is what's going to allow me to be, live a long, healthy life until I'm 120. And not 120 in my bed, 120 where I'm active to the day I die, right? So that's the thing that was missing. So this is kind of the basis around what you're doing is getting people realigned, getting people straightened out, teaching them what they're doing wrong. So just take me into that a little bit, and maybe you could give some tools for people to take home with about and what they can do to help improve their posture, their movement, that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, you bring up a great point. Pretty much, so to try and give a perspective of anytime you work out, you are pretty much tearing up the muscle fibers in order to build them or make them lean. And so without the proper stretching and warm up, without the proper warm up, you're at more risk to injure yourself. And then without that cool down and stretch is you're gonna allow all those muscle fibers just to kind of land and heal wherever, whereas by stretching you're going to put them back in place, and then the longevity of that muscle and maximizing what you're trying to do with it. So ideally you're trying to do some dynamic stretching before you do a workout, and then you're doing some static after. So
what's the difference between dynamic and static?
Yeah, I was just going to get into that. So dynamic is perpetual movement for a minimum of 10 seconds, whereas static is holding for a minimum of 10 seconds. And you're going to do an overall warm-up on the body. Ideally, you're starting with the right side first, because there's been studies showing that because of the way your blood flows, by warming up the right side first will actually help the flow more effectively. And then at the end, whatever you worked out, so if you did like a arms or chest workout, you're going to stretch mostly that area for static. The big thing that I have noticed in my practice is ankles. I would say 80% of the root of the problem is always the ankle. And if you think about it, that you have gravity just right there, and then you have all the weight of your body on that small hinge joint. And if you don't do proper mobility there, then your calves are going to get tight, your ankles are going to get tight, then your knees are going to start trying to compensate for the lack of mobility, and then it just moves up to the hips, the lower back, the mid back, and then shoulders, neck. So really, I would say every day try and work on your ankles.
Yeah. Because I think just to interject there for a second, I think people like with back pain, that might not even be the root source of the back pain. It could be the ankles, it could be a knee, or it could be a hip out of line, or whatever it may be. So I think that's good. What kind of mobility can people do? Like, how can you improve the mobility in your ankles? It's like simple ankle rotations is what I've been doing.
Yeah. So like, I'm trying to describe it out without trying to act it out, because usually if people ask me, then I can just show them right there. So, so either using like a back of the chair for balance is going up on your toes and then back down, doing that, I would say like 10 times, and then going back on your heels, making sure that your legs are straight. And then when either standing up or if you're sitting down, again, using that chair for balance, is that you would then point your toes to you and away and do that 10 times, and then do counterclockwise, clockwise rotation. That will help. If you massage starting at the lower part of your calf, where like it starts rising, and following that medial line, so the middle of your calf there, all the way up to your knee, that can help loosen things up. So those are some kind of good dynamic-esque, that last one being a bit more static. And then a good other static is by putting your toes on the wall, keeping your legs straight and bending, like bringing your hips towards the wall. That will really help loosen that up. Try and do that each side 3 to 5 times, holding for at least 15 seconds.
Cool. Let's I'll give you my example, and you can kind of tell me what you think would be best. Like for me, I've been working out, off and on my whole life, kind of, and I spend usually about an hour and a half at the gym, where I'm doing usually like a weight workout and then followed by some cardio. Recently, I just kind of changed my workouts to doing only 3 days of like lifting weights, and then I'm doing 2 days of yoga and 1 day of like cardio. So I probably will be adding in some more cardio after my weight days as well. But anyways, then I got introduced to this movement therapy, and so I've been doing the rotations, but I'm doing these rotations, and then I'm doing these stretches, and then all of a sudden now my workout's becoming like this 2.5 hour workout, right? So like for the average person, how often do you need to be doing mobility work? Is it every day? How long? Like, just like, you don't have to get into detail about what exactly work, but what's like, what's the process? Because, you know, when I first got introduced to this, I was kind of like feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I'm like, holy geez, I've been missing all of this. And now I'm adding this on top of everything that I'm doing. How does it all fit together?
So mobility is something that you can do every day. And even doing like 5-10 minutes a day will help, because if you think about it, like a car, you need maintenance on it. Like the axle can go at times or whatever the case. So the more that you put into that work for that mobility, the less you will have to do. Like, let's say if you've never done mobility, that first 2 to 4 weeks is going to be intense. You're going to need more. You might need at least a hour a day to dedicate. But then by the end, you should start, you doing 10 minutes a day will just maintain.
Okay.
Just doing small steps at the end. If it becomes overwhelming again, just doing something than nothing. I mean, just to keep in perspective is that the difference between a sedentary lifestyle and an active lifestyle. So sedentary meaning sitting around a lot, not doing much. Maybe you just have an office job, so you're not being very active or whatever, and is a half hour. So just going out for a walk, doing a little bit of movement work goes a long way to longevity of life, and the better posture that you have, the better that your organs will be able to sit in your body and be able to function. And the more stiff you are, the more areas will get bunched up, and the muscles have nerves and veins and things like that in them. So the more it's bunched up and the more stiff, the less energy. So the more your body is loose and has that maximum range of motion, that means everything can flow in your body a lot better. So then you're not bunched up. You don't have that feeling of fatigue because the nutrients can't properly flow to where they need to go. So the more your mobility is on point, the more energy you'll have to be able to do things.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's really interesting stuff, because that is one thing I noticed, that, when I'm on point with all this stuff, my energy levels are higher. I feel looser. I feel more relaxed. I don't have the tightness in the muscles. How important do you think like chiropractor, massage, fascial stretch, these things are?
It's crucial. I mean, case in point, even I need one. I was away this weekend with the varsity University of Windsor cross country team in Goderich, staying in these like small little bunk beds. Screwed up my shoulder a little bit. Went and saw a chiropractor yesterday. I'm going to be seeing him again tomorrow. So yeah, even I need work on it. Like, I've been doing a lot of work myself, rolling out. My two best weapons that I have in order for my mobility is a lacrosse ball and a band. And working those and using those. I see massage when I can, because again, going back to, you need, especially if you're working out a lot, you're going to be breaking a lot of muscles, and if you're not properly putting them in place, then you're going to create more knots in your body. You're going to be more stiff, and how can you get a maximum lift in if you're so stiff?
Right.
And people joke that I'm like the posture Nazi because of how rigid I am with that, and it's because like not having that range of motion, you can't do proper form. If you can't do proper form, you're only going to be hindering yourself on your workout and potentially injuring yourself down the line. Yeah,
definitely. Cool. I mean, all really amazing information, Jaz. I think you provide a ton of value to everyone listening today. What I like to do when I end podcasts is I just like to go back and forth with 3 things. We'll each say one that have been needle movers for you in the last. It could be over the course of your life. It could be in the last 90 days, whatever. Just try and think of 3 points that have been needle movers. It can be related to this podcast. It can be completely off topic. It doesn't matter. So I'll start, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth to kind of wrap this thing up. For me, one of the big needle movers for me in the last week actually is just really, I've been tracking everything. This is something that I've learned, that anything that is out of control in your life, you just track. And so I really wanted to get more efficient with my time. So I've got this app where you can clock in and clock out for everything. So I created a clock in for, work, clock in for exercise, clock in for sleep, clock in for personal time. And what I came to the realization is that I wasn't working nearly as efficiently or as focused as I thought I was, So I try and work in like a 90-30 rule or a 90-20 rule, where I'm 90 minutes of dedicated, focused energy or effort. I call it UIE, I think, uninterrupted effort. So I want to be like just laser like focused. And so I was doing this 90-20 thing, but my 90 was good, and I couldn't believe the amount of work I was getting done. But then my 20 or my 30 was going into like an hour because I was on phone calls with people or whatever. And I ended up spending like an 8-hour day. I was in the office here from like 7 in the morning till 6, or so, even longer than an 8-hour day. And I only did like 5 hours of focused work. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like, how inefficient have I been recently? So just really tracking your focused effort, and I think is crucial. And that could be for anything, exercise, working out. When you're at the gym, you're not like texting other people, these kinds of things. So that's one for me.
It's actually something that you kind of brought up a little bit earlier, about the mindset, I guess would be the title, but having that negative mindset will manifest disease. So really realizing in the last year and a half that because of the mindset I used to have and the lifestyle that I used to have created the type 1 disease in me, and now realizing that and I have the ability to change it. And I'm not barely depressed, and if I start feeling that negativity, I question where it's coming from, analyze it, and then move on, and able to move on a lot quicker, and really realizing the law of attraction within that. And I've actually wrote a seminar about the first 5 minutes of you waking up and how crucial that is to your day, and how whatever you project in that first 5 minutes will happen throughout the day. So that's really been a big game changer for me.
Yeah, I had a different one, but now I changed mine because for me, because you said getting up and having a mindset, and like this is like a big thing of what I teach. Part of the reason it's called Rise Up Rich is part of it is waking up early. For me, like 5 a.m. is like my time. And when I'm getting up at 5 a.m., I am like firing on all cylinders. I've found that you only need to fight the urge to go back to bed for about 5 minutes, and then you're awake and you can start going about your day. But the other thing that I put into my 5 a.m. Get up routine is I have this foundation of these things that I have to do before I do anything else, and before I check my phone, before I do anything. And those things are express gratitude, like I just write in my journal gratitude. Then I just write in my journal. I just get what's in my head out, so I'm not thinking about these things all day long. The other thing I do is I track my dreams. I write out my dreams, because the dreams are like a window into your subconscious. Your subconscious is what really is controlling your behaviors. So if you can start to get a look through that window, you can start realizing like where your subconscious is constantly going. You can begin to heal. And then the last thing I do is there's two things. I meditate, and I ask for, this is what I say in the morning. I say, Lord, I pray to you to know thy will and for the energy to fulfill it, right? And this could be universe, God, whatever. It's your understanding of a higher power. Could be love, could be family, it doesn't matter. But basically saying, what's in the highest good, please bring that to me, present those things to me, and also give me the energy to go out and get after it. So, and the last thing for me is exercise. So starting your day, like you mentioned, on the right foot, having that foundation in place, so that no matter what happens, if you do that foundation, your day is gonna be good. So that's my number 2.
I'm gonna go with number two with I don't even know how to explain it the best, but like the idea that what we think the authorities are trying to do to help us is actually possibly hindering us. And especially in recent, I brought it up a little bit earlier, in pretty much in the last, I would say maybe month, is really realizing that the system is set up for separation and segregation, and realizing that can help you not get sucked into, you know, social media battles and debate, like heated debates that get unnecessary toxic. So being able to filter that and understand that, so then I don't react to placate and give that more power. And really realizing that you choose to give power to positive or negative, and making that choice. And especially now, I rather make that choice of being a power of positivity than negative.
Yeah, choose the good.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think another one for me is like recognizing my collapses. You know, for me, like a collapse is like someone wants to, Andrew Facca, my mentor, described a collapse to me as like putting on like a comfy sweater. You know, and my favorite collapse is self-doubt. You know, like especially when I'm here and I'm, you know, launching this new platform, Rise Up Rich, and I have all these things that are going to be coming out, and like, you know, I start to get nervous, and the thing I start to say is, you know, what the fuck do I know? You know, who the hell's going to listen to me? You know, who wants my help? Like, because, you know, I still struggle with things, right? And self-doubt would be one of them, you know. And just like you said, like depression, even though you've overcome it, doesn't mean that it doesn't still rear its ugly head every now and then, right? And your depression could be like your comfy sweater. And when you get into that zone of like self-doubt, you can really, you know, you can just kind of envision myself putting on this comfy hoodie and zipping it up and like, oh man, no one's going to listen to me. No one's going to come to my seminars. No one's going to, you know, buy my online programs. Like, who am I to say this? And you can just kind of just keep going down that road. But the great thing about the power of the mind is that it has power over those emotions. So when you feel that, I had a moment of it last night, actually. You know, in my group set, I meet with a spiritual mastermind group every Monday night at my house, and some of the stuff that came up kind of put me into that zone of self-doubt again, because I'm getting ready to launch this end anxiety program, and I started going there, and I was like, and what I did was, and this is the advice that Andrew gave me, is that you can just choose to not put that coat on. You can see it coming, you know, and just say, whoa, I'm not going down that road. And you know, I felt myself starting to go down that road, and I said, wait, this is the cloak, this is the comfy sweater, and I'm not going to put that comfy sweater on. I'm just going to choose, because I have the power over that sweater, to say, no, I'm not doing that. And I instantly just changed my mindset in a split second. And, you know, right back this morning, and I'm back on track, and I got the self-doubt's gone, you know. So instead of choosing to go, sometimes some people can stay in their comfy sweater, in that collapse, depression, apathy, self-doubt, whatever it may be, for days, you know, for weeks, for months, for lifetimes. So just having the ability to say no and not get into that, not put that comfy self-doubt, comfy collapse sweater on, I think has been a huge one for me.
Yeah. And just to kind of touch on that a little bit is in the research that I've done when it comes to spirituality, and one big thing that they talk about is moments of those self-doubt is pretty much the negative entities are trying to put that into you, because there is that fear that you're now going to have overcome them, and they don't have that power. So they're going to try and reach out, especially if you're meant to do something very positive and something great for humanity, that they're going to try and do anything in order to grasp, to keep you down at their low vibration. So I really keep that in mind now, and be like, okay, when I get that self-doubt, it's almost like, okay, I am onto something, and it almost gives that validity to what I'm doing because that's there. And know that I'm on that path because it's now becoming fearful of the possibilities I can do.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot because it's like it's the unreasonable person that's the person that's going to change the world, right?
Yeah.
And even the term "change the world," is a tough one because
Yeah.
Hawkins used to say like if you want to change the world, the first thing you can do is let go of your desire to change the world.
Yep.
But it is though the unreasonable man that pushes the boundaries, so. That's a great point I think that you make is that when you're starting to feel that self-doubt, it's because you're pushing the boundaries, you're pushing the edge of your comfort zone, and life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a cool spin on that for sure.
Well, yeah, and it's definitely a part of the enlightenment path is that, especially in this day and age, you're going to be a bit alone on it because there's a lot of people that are still where they are, and because you're evolving, that there's going to be that kind of gap at times, and it's the ability to be able to deal with that. I'm trying to think of my number three as I've been responding to that, and I think I'm going to use. So this summer, I took an elective in physics. So it was Intro to Physics Part 2. And I've never taken any physics class in my entire life, whether it be high school or anything. So it was definitely a challenge. And I took linear algebra. And kind of two small little things that kind of came up with that kind of helped me put in perspective is when we were talking about electromagnetic fields. In a natural state, a positive charge will run with the current of the field and the negative runs against. So I kind of had this or possible epiphany about it, that's why a lot of yoga and meditational practices talk about being positive, is that by you thinking positive, you're going to keep positive charge, which means you're going to flow within the electromagnetic field of your body. So things will run smoothly. But once you start thinking negative and manifesting that, then you become negatively charged. So then you're going against that current, which is also why people will feel like the weight of the world is against them, or that nothing's going right. It's because they're going against that grain. So, which has also kind of motivated me to go on, and ideally I want to get into a PhD and looking into using traditional science to prove why energy healing practices like Reiki work, why they work, and the importance of them. Because I think we're on that cusp of starting to fully realize our true potential. And if I can find a way to try and people understand through a scientific way for them to why these practices are so important and why they've been around for thousands and thousands of years, then maybe people will start understanding and gaining a new perspective. So it's kind of motivated me for that. And the other thing in linear that I kind of learned was about dimensions, and how when you go from a third to fourth dimension, you gain a lot of knowledge, but then going from fourth to third, you lose. So an example for us is right now, you and I are live, but it's being filmed. We are now becoming two-dimensional. We're losing on that camera. We're losing some dimensions of us. So again, kind of made me think, well, maybe that's why when we die and we come back, if you believe in reincarnation, which I do, you won't be able to bring that knowledge that you gained from that fourth dimension, because third dimension doesn't have the ability to comprehend that knowledge. So why we have that kind of amnesia in between lives is because we can't bring that information back with us.
Yeah, right.
So with learning that is just knowing that as much knowledge as I have, I will never have all the knowledge. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's trying to keep on a humble and not let my ego get in the way of my greater good.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the third one is ultimately is ego.
Yeah. I mean, ego is huge for sure. Yeah, well, let's wrap it up here, Jazz. Okay. I think you provided a ton of value to everyone that's listening, and we'll definitely provide a link on this podcast to where people can get in contact with you if they're interested in what you're doing, because Jazz again is a proactive, holistic health coach, fascial stretch therapy, all this kind of stuff that he's doing. So. Really good, and obviously he's in a good place in his life to be able to provide guidance, because without a good coach, without a good mentor, there's just so much information out there and you can get lost, so if you have a good mentor, you can kind of go on the most direct route to the quickest way of success. So thanks again for coming on the podcast. I think it was really great. We'll have to have you back again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I appreciate having this opportunity to talk. It was really great. So.
Awesome. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please do that. And you can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I'm all over the place. So make sure you do that. And please leave a comment if you have anything to add to this podcast, because when we share and we comment, it helps this podcast grow, and it helps pass this message along. It's through giving that we receive. So thanks for taking the time to listen, and we will see you next time.